Welcome everyone to another episode of The Inside Word. My name is Lachlan McLean from Beer Cartel, Australia's #1 craft beer retailer. For our 11th episode, I chat to Balter co-founder Stirling Howland and head brewer Scotty Hargraves about their amazing rise and success. I hope you enjoy this chat with one of Australia's leading craft breweries. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks for having us, Lachlan.
I guess first questions that I always like to ask on the podcast is what's happening at Balter? What's brewing? What's been going on?
Well, we just had our Friday lunch with the team, and Aussie just brewed us up some amazing chicken burgers. So everyone's a bit full and happy right now.
Yeah, pineapple was slightly overdone, I think, but it was pretty standard Friday fare.
Bit of a written warning, I think, for that overdone pineapple, maybe. Yeah.
So is it a normal thing to have a Friday lunch with the team?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we fire up the barbie every Friday, and we got all these awesome people throwing food at us, like Bread Social, who make this amazing bread, and and then Aussie's on the tongs, and he's a mate of the Three Blue Ducks boys, so he knows how to cook pretty good. So
yeah, nice.
Yeah.
And is there anything brewing today in particular, Scotty?
Yeah. We're always brewing. So today we've got a bunch of XPA on the go. We've also got some more lager going into tanks. Looking ahead to the next 4 to 6 weeks, and we've got a lot more of that beer out there. So
yeah, absolutely. I know ours just landed and it's tasting great.
Yeah, nice. Thank you. Yeah, it's just it's funny. It's one of those beers where it seems so simple, but they're often the ones that you have to put the most work into. So. Yeah, a bit of lager through the brew house today, some XPA, which is never far away from, having just been brewed or about to be brewed. So, being such a mainstay, we've always got to keep that one ticking away. A couple other bits and pieces down in the pilot system, a couple of surprises here and there.
Yeah, nice. So I thought that before we kind of get into the Balter story, I'd like to have a chat about both of your backgrounds. So I start with, I guess, Stirling. What were you doing before Balter?
Mate, well, basically I've been a creative director most of my career and a digital marketer for a big chunk of my career as well. I started out at Billabong when I was 14 years of age, got into the marketing department there when I was 18. Thankfully didn't have to go to uni because I'm not the best at books. I'm more of a practical person who loves to learn on the job. And mate, so I grew up in Billabong. I was there for 19 years, was exposed to the digital revolution pretty early on in the late 90s and 2000s. And it kind of shaped my career there and became a brand marketer out of all that, and was the head creative director at Billabong. And then left there to work for a fintech company called Nimble. We did a bunch of above-the-line marketing and a bunch of different stuff in that space, which was really, really fun. I wasn't super jazzed on the product, so I sort of left there. And then that led us to Balter. And Balter was started obviously by Mick Fanning, Parko, B. Durbidge and Josh Kerr, and we all had a friendship that went back to our teenage years, so that's kind of how we came about to start Balter. That's the crack in Stirling's career.
Yeah, did you have kind of an interest in beer before that, or where'd that all come from?
Yeah, I did. So I remember I got belted over the sort of craft beer head when I was probably about 10 years ago. We were at the Supper Club in Melbourne, and they were serving these beautiful beers out of bottles called Little Creatures Bright Ale. And
nice.
At that stage, I was really just into, lagers like everyone else. And I liked, Japanese beers. And, that was my height of premium at the stage. And then this beautiful, floral, fruity little Bright Ale came along when it was just totally epic back in the day. And that was my first memory of going, oh, okay, so beer's more than what I think it is. So.
Yeah, nice. So, Scotty, your history. So you're head brewer. How'd you get into brewing?
I had a concrete business in Canberra, and basically I had to work away for a couple of weeks to go and help out some relatives of mine, a couple of hours north of Canberra. This is about 2006, I think it was, and I'd had a long term, I would guess you would call it, interest in beer. sort of back around 99, 2000, I first started to check out new beers. And back then, like, that was the very sort of start of Little Creatures Pale Ale, which was called, Little Creatures Live back then. And the very first of the James Squire beers came out. And, it was very, very sort of early days, I guess, in Australian craft beer. It was like there'd been a sort of a start in the 90s. It sort of faltered a bit with Matilda Bay and whatnot, and a couple of others, and then some of the real pioneers like the guys at Mountain Goat and Holgate and those sorts of guys, and Ridge Roads, but there weren't that many. And so yeah, I was up in a town called Grenfell in central New South Wales, and I was annoying my cousins with their beer choices. At the end of the day, after concrete and 40-degree heat all day, and my auntie just ended up saying, "Yeah, Scotty, maybe you should do something in beer. You seem pretty passionate about it." And all she meant was I was annoying everybody, being this sort of beer nerd guy, I guess, a proto beer nerd guy. And I actually went back to Canberra and thought, you know what, she's right. I really I'm intrigued by beer, but I don't know very much about it. So I enrolled in a one-day adult education course that was being held at the Wig and Pen Tavern in Civic in the middle of Canberra. And I went in there for this course this one day, and Lockie McComish, the owner of the place, went and he's talking through the history of beer, and he went and got a kilo of malt and ran it through Richard's mill, and added some hot water to it in a lunchbox esky.
Ben spoke, Richard.
Ben spoke, yeah. So Rich Watson, Ben spoke, and because he did 17 years in at the Wig. So anyway, as soon as Lockie sort of put this mash in a little lunchbox, there was just an epiphany moment for me. The smell of that mash just was so primal, but it was really, really familiar to me. I'm not sure why, because I'd never done any brewing as such, but I think that day it actually changed the chemistry in my brain. So I remember going home just enthralled by it, and lying in bed the next morning wondering, would I even dare dream to be a brewer or be in the beer industry one day? And then one of the last things Lockie said on that day was, go check out these guys. And it was a picture of the poster of the Canberra Brewers on the wall at the Wig. So I went along to a couple of Canberra Brewers meetings and started to get to know some folks there, and started to get some hand-me-down brewing gear off those guys. Started making beer and started making better beer and started winning medals and competitions, and it pretty much snowballed from there into an offer to be the head brewer at Sunshine Coast Brewery about just under 2 years after my first home brew. So
my hometown.
Yeah, it accelerated pretty rapidly for me. I'd always been one of those guys that was just sort of good at most things, but brewing seemed to be the one thing where I was, like that I could actually knuckle down and really get, more competent at, I suppose, and sort of operate at a level that I could sustain. There's a lot of hard work that goes with all the, everything to do with brewing. So the concrete background made that. No, I don't know if it's easy, but it certainly prepared me for the grind of brewing.
And he's good at mixing stuff, as we like to say.
I'm good at stuff, apparently. Yeah.
Brewing is it's certainly not what's the word? I think people glorify what it actually is a lot of the time.
Well, that's right, but it's one of those things where people ask me about it quite a bit, like, oh, should I be a brewer or should I do this or that, in the industry? And it's like, well, this is, if you're prepared for the grind, if you'd more or less do this, show up every day even if you weren't getting paid and still put in, like stupid hours and commitment, then there's probably a good chance it's for you. If you're just sort of hanging around for the glory or because beer's in at the moment, then you'll probably be found out fairly quickly just by the job itself. So, so I did the Sunny Coast, and then I was there for a year, then went down to Stone and Wood. Was there for the first 4 years, really, of the fairly early days. I think Brad had been making beer, what eventually got renamed as Pacific Ale. They'd been doing that for about 6 or 7 months, I think, before I got there. And played a part in all the early days of that. Then I went to Byron Bay Brewing Company for 18 months.
Yep.
And, just got to tinker a lot around there, which was really good. And then, because I've always been a home brewer, so I was always brewing all week and then brewing all weekend anyway. So I just spent like the best part of 18 months, 2 years, like really just playing around with new things and bits and pieces and beers like XBA that was, was developing in the garage. And then one day I got a phone call about this potential brewery starting on the Gold Coast, and got in contact, and away we went.
So I think I'll jump over to Stirling. So Balter, before we kind of get into how you got Scotty up there, how did Balter all come to be?
Mate, so B. Durbridge, one of the 7 founders, he just had this thing in his head. He wanted to start a brewery, probably since about 2012. The boys are all pro surfers, and they've been scooting around the world, getting paid to go surfing for a living. And I think when they started out as teenagers, they were all traveling the world, just drinking a lot of real cheap piss and normal beers and stuff like that. And as they started to get older and a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more sophisticated, they started sort of running into a lot more good beer, especially when they're traveling through America. And it sort of just triggered something off in Bede. And for the next 2 years, Bede just kept going around the sun talking about wanting to start a brewery, a craft brewery. And they got to Hawaii in 2014. And they're sitting around going, shit, are we going to just continue to talk about this, or are we actually going to get off our ass and do something about it? And it was at that point that I got a call from Mick Fanning, and it was a couple of days before my first daughter was due. And Mick was going, hey, Stirl, we're thinking about starting a brewery, and we're wondering whether you wanted to get involved. They knew early on that they had to get a team together to bring this to life. And they're off surfing for a living. Their skill sets probably don't fully overlap with running a full-time brewery. So, they got me on board. We knew we needed a GM at the time, so we got a guy called Ant McDonald on board, and Sean Ronan, who is a friend of everyone's as well, who had a lot of business experience. So between the marketing and branding side, between the sort of GM role that Ant took on and myself, we knew we could pull a team together to at least start the process and see if we could see this thing come to life. In our first meeting in January 2015, we decided very early on, and because I didn't want to start a surf lifestyle business. We'd all been in the surf industry, and we knew the good beer was so much bigger than a surf beer per se. So we knew very early on that we wanted to make the very best beer we could, and we needed to find the very best brewer we could. If we were just going to put something humdrum in that tinny, there's a good chance that we're just going to be a gimmick and a celebrity-endorsed bit of nothingness, And we knew someone might try Mick Fanning's beer for the first time, but if it's shit, they're not going to come back again. So very early on, it was not about being a celebrity brand. It was about being a good beer company. And that's where we went on the hunt. And we had a bunch of brewers that were lined up, but there was one that really kind of drew our attention right in, just his knowledge about beer, his approach about beer, and he wasn't available. So we found Scotty. No, I'm just kidding.
He's actually, like, the truth is the first 6 guys weren't available. But I was.
Yeah. No, so we, Scotty, we just were attracted to it, but in classic Scotty sort of nature, and he contests this a little bit, but it was true. We were like, oh, he's bloody knows his stuff, but a bit scowly. I don't know if he likes us, Like, I don't think he wants to do this with us. I just don't think he likes us at all. But he was just sceptical. He was sceptical about the fancy marketer. He was sceptical about the boys. He was sceptical about why we're coming in to do this. And it was good because we had to sort of earn that trust. And I think over the next 8 weeks, we hung out a lot. We got to talk a lot, and we did earn each other's trust. And I don't think it hurt saying, hey, mate, we're going to try and raise enough money here that we could help build your brewery, your favourite brewery, the brewery that's in your mind, you're keen. And he went home that night, and we always say this because if it wasn't for Nick, we might not have got Scotty. And Nick, Scotty's wife, she's a matriarch of Balter in a lot of ways. She gave him a good kick up the arse and said, you'd be crazy not to take the opportunity. And we came back the next day, and he gave us a resounding yes. So, yeah, that's got us to Scotty.
Yeah, and that was the sort of second time my wife had bullied me like that, as far as my brewing career goes. When I first actually saw the first job interview, and I'm still in Canberra, we're still concreters. I've got a Bobcat and a couple of trucks, and I saw this ad for a brewing job on the Sunshine Coast, and I showed it to Nick, my wife. I said, "Look at this," and she said, "Yeah, good. Ring him tomorrow. Like, ring these folks tomorrow." And the next day, I'm out at work and I'm digging up a driveway or something in the Bobcat, and I kept getting these continual messages. Have you rung that brewery yet? Have you rung that brewery yet? And it was no. Leave me alone. I'm busy. I'm at work. I'm digging this driveway out or whatever it might have been. And I'm pretty sure it was about the 20th message that I got from her that said basically, "Don't effing come home until you ring that brewery." So, that was a pretty.
Thanks, Nick.
That was a pretty solid shunt, if you like. So I got on the phone and rung Greg up at Sunshine Coast Brewery, and I think within about 48 hours I was up there talking to those guys, taking a bit of beer up with me from my garage, from beer at home, and basically by the time I flew back down to Canberra the next morning, Greg was on the phone saying, "Job's yours if you want it." So same again when it came to Balter, I was having been through a pretty hefty growth stage, I guess, with the startup. The early days of Stone and Wood, and seeing what actually happens when something like this takes off, and A, could it ever happen again, and B, I know what we're in for if it does. Was it was much more about that than me not liking these guys, because I love them now. They're mates and family to me, but at the time, I was a little wary. It just seemed to be. I sort of wondered: is this the first of the swoopers? The guys who've been watching from the sidelines and think, what we can chuck in a few bucks and very quickly just flip something out of this, or cook the goose that laid the golden egg or something. So that was always in the back of my mind, but it became pretty obvious after, as Stirl said, after a few weeks that their intentions were pure. They were nothing more than, we want to build a brewery. We've got no bloody idea how to do it. We've heard you're the man. Come and build your dream brewery and make the beers you want to make. And while I'm pondering all this, it was definitely my wife, Nick, who said, "You're an knucklehead," is probably a politer way to put it. What the hell are you waiting for? So, yeah.
Was there ever a, point or a conversation that you had that kind of gave you an inkling of where Balter might go? Did you ever expect it to get to this point?
I don't know. It's one of those funny things. I remember when I spoke to Sean early on, because my initial contact was with Sean, and he's this American guy, FaceTiming me from San Diego, which is kind of flattering because San Diego's got an awful lot of great breweries, and there's in a lot of ways craft beer central in the US. So that was kind of flattering, but also like just the sort of size and the scale, and I could just see he had this sort of grand. There was an optimism, and it was, it was pretty insane initially, like the premise of how big this could potentially be, And for me, it was like, well, I certainly didn't start Stone and Wood, and I didn't create Pacific Ale, but I was there from the pretty early days and through a pretty massive growth stage, and I know that sort of thing only comes along once in a lifetime. So I thought he was, just thinking, overlaying an American template over what our industry was like here, being much smaller. And I remember pointing out to him that we've got 25 million people, and California has 44 million people just in the one state. But I guess you hope for the best. I couldn't help think that with particularly with Stirls and Ant on board, and not no disrespect to the guys, but it wasn't about these personalities because that's one thing I was wary of using, because that was just going to cost everybody a lot of money making some dumb celebrity beer for if we were going to be really cynical about it. But once it became once we'd sort of all established that no, this is fair income and we're going to have a real crack at this, then it became a lot easier just to knuckle down on putting together a brew house that's going to be able to make the beers I want to make. And the XPA was one I had there, and I can remember saying at one point, we'll actually build a brewery around this beer, and this beer will help us build the rest of the brewery. And luckily, that's sort of how it panned out a bit. Otherwise, I'd look like an idiot. But there was I guess there was an optimism, and it was really weird because I didn't really know these guys that well, and it was in the process of raising money and designing and then getting to build a brewery that we sort of got to know each other. A lot of these guys had long-term friendships, but I guess I was the outsider. In a lot of ways, I felt like I had to prove myself to these guys as much as they did to me that it was the right thing to do. And anyway, onwards and upwards, it turned out to be the right thing so far.
You mentioned there that the XPA was a beer that you kind of brought with you.
Yep.
Was it just a beer that you'd been playing around on the homebrew? Or
it was like, because I'm always brewing. It used to be a joke when I was at Stirling Howland, that I brewed 5,000 litres on a Friday or something, and then go home and brew 50 litres in my garage on a Saturday. But that was quite true, because that really taught me, in the really early days, how to brew. And it taught me a lot about ingredients and process and all this sort of stuff. So it was something that I'd sort of never stopped doing, even when I was already a pro brewer. I was always doing more homework, if you like. And XPA was just a beer. I'd really started to get better access to a bunch of American hops that I was really liking, and it was like, well, how can I get these hops into a beer that just remains, really, really drinkable and sessionable, and doesn't lose any of the, any of that sort of drinkability factor, but still be able to show off American hops. So I was playing around for a long time, because I'd nailed a few other styles, dare I say it. I'd been fairly well known for my wheat beers and German beers and stuff, and we were getting better and better access to American hops all the time. So I was really starting to put them to work and put myself through the hoops as well and see what we could come up with. So it was kind of handy, I guess, that from a momentum point of view, that pretty early on, we knew that we already had a flagship beer long before we had any stainless steel here, long before we had a brewery to speak of. We had, a beer that we knew that we could start with. So that helped.
And then the name itself, XPA, but before it came out, I can't think of too many beers that use that style, especially ones that had been super popular. Where's that from?
Well, for me, X in XPA has always stood for extra pale, ale. And there were a couple around before ours. There was Riders XPA. There was Wolf of the Willows had an XPA.
Of course.
Deschutes have always had for years done an XPA in the US, which stood for them for experimental pale ale. So different premise. But some of the ones I had tried a sort of mix of international ones and Australian ones, in a lot of ways for me, were still quite American pale ale sort of focused and variants of that. And I wanted a beer that had basically to take out all the crystal malt, which adds those sort of darker colours. But the thing about crystal malts is as they stale, they actually add a lot of sort of dried fruitcake sort of characters, which I'm not a big fan of. So I wanted a beer that was a lot leaner, and I guess maybe almost like a baby West Coast IPA in a lot of ways, that was able to showcase these really bright popping, luscious, fruity, tropical hops, but that weren't going to fall apart when the malt structure sort of started to age and let the beers down, and then they become cloying And for me, the oxidation just becomes really evident, the staling character. And so it was about keeping a beer that had all that luscious hop character, but had a really tight and bright sort of malt base as well. So it was just, I think I remember saying to Stirls at one point, sprung like a sports car sort of thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
That was way back before that. That was my intention when I'm at home in Byron in the garage, just trying to find a way to really express these hops, but not tip over the cliff and go too far and make the hop character too out of balance or astringent, but at the same time have just enough malt. It was almost like I was trying to make a beer that had just a tiny little bit too much, and you know that in time that's probably enough as your audience, I suppose, kind of catches up to what you're doing. And you know, we didn't know. You know, I'll never claim to have invented the term XPA. If I did anything with this beer, and we did as a brewery, it's like we kind of made XPA a thing in Australia.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And I guess the XPA has kind of been the real driving force behind Balter. And I was just going through some of the stupid amounts of awards that you've won. The ABA 2017 Champion Medium Size Brewery, the 2018 Large Size Brewery, Gab's Hottest 100 Champion 17 and 18, over 30 medals in the last 3 to 4 years. How does that feel?
It's great. It's great. There's no denying that, you know, it's better than being kicked in the head or booed at for your beers. But the biggest thing for us really is that we've got 60-odd employees in this business now, and we've managed to build a robust brewing company that's based on quality and great beer and great branding and a great experience. You know, that's if XBA has been able to do anything. You know, sure, it's won a lot of awards, but it's you know, I've got one of my brewers was one of our builders labourers here when we first started, and you know, in some way, our beers have been able to give Gavin like a new career. At 50, he wouldn't have ever thought he was going to turn into a brewer at 50, and you know, seeing a lot of those guys' lives be transformed is at least as you know, as least as cool, and you know, and you know, I'm lost for words. Really, it's a thing that, you know, with you see that where you actually get to transform someone's life, or whether it's a drinker who's just you've knocked off the rough edges a bit for them because they've gone home to their favourite beer on a Friday and it happens to be your beer, or whether it's someone who you work with who had a completely different career path a while ago, and you've given them something else and a new lease on, you know, on their working life, and led them to new experiences that they probably could never imagine they were going to have. Because that's what happened to me. Like being a brewer is just the things that have, you know, sort of happened to myself and my family since we became brewers is just not, you know, it's not something I could ever imagine would have happened as a concreter in Canberra, you know. So it's pretty awesome all around, you know. And we've got a bunch of beers that have done well. You know, we've got, I think out of our core range, I think 4 of the 5 beers have gold medaled at least somewhere. We've got 3 of the 5 that have won trophies at different competitions. So let alone all the, you know, the public sort of acceptance and appreciation for what we do. So, but you know, that's the big thing. Obviously, you know, Stirls' side of the coin, you know, the branding and marketing play a huge part in that as well.
Yeah, I was going to touch on that. I think there's massive congratulations to yourself from the brewing department and the qualities of the beers that Balter's producing. But I think almost maybe not as equal, but very, very close to that people kind of know Balter for is the branding and the identity that you've created. And Stirling, I'd imagine you're chief responsible for that. The logo and the branding from Balter, it was so unique at the time. Where did it come from?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. You know, through my career, I was always drawn to minimalism. I love it. I love using way less words to communicate an idea, to communicate a campaign, or whatever you're doing. I think less is less is more all the time. And so when we set out to do this, it was about creating a simple, beautiful aesthetic. Our pulse check at the time was there was no white cans in market, and I was very fond of the colour white. But outside of that, maybe a lot of the branding was fairly busy, and it was very heritage sort of based. So for us, we just wanted to create something that was a timestamp for when we were starting a brewery in 2016. Our first tinnies went out, and we just started at that point. And before we even had the name Balter, we'd written down beer smiley, because that kind of is how we feel about it. And you'll see the beer smiley on all our cartons. It's on the front of our building here, and I think it's the world view of nearly anyone who loves beer. And so for us, we had a really nice foundation to build a brand off and to create a tone of voice. And it was funny, we had about 150 names, and they were all just turd names. They were so bad. It sounded like we were just trying to start a craft brewery, and these are the craft brewery names we've come up with.
Are you able to share what any of those might have been?
Oh, shit. They had numbers in them, and just a lot of colloquial, a lot of colonial references, and a lot of brothers and this and that. And it just wasn't working for us. And nothing wrong with if you got those things in your name, but it just was not working for us. And anyway, Mick was lurking around the internet. We always say he's really good at surfing, but he turns out he's all right at the internet too, apparently. But he was lurking around the internet, and he found this word on this Tumblr blog, and it was Balter, and it said to dance artlessly without particular skill or grace, but usually with enjoyment. And I loved it because it's pretty much human nature all summed up in one sentence. But the with enjoyment bit just played straight into the beer smiley, and it kind of set the tone for Balter. So out of there, you see that happy little can get made with a bunch of design principles in there that people might not be able to articulate, but they can definitely feel it. And I'm super proud that people love to hold that tinny in their hand and share it with their mates. So, and I think the big thing about the design too is I never wanted to create something that overpowered what Scotty was doing. I didn't want something that was all about look at me, just because it was ostentatious. It had to support what Scotty was doing. It had to be kind of like an assist to the beer we were making, not something that overshadowed it. So I think there's just a beautiful marriage between design and beer.
If you're looking for any of the Balter beers, new releases, or an old favourite, be sure to check out the Beer Cartel website at www.beercartel.com.au. Was there ever a point, you mentioned there that the whole tinnies and all that, but 2016, it was still a very much a tipping point in the industry where, cans were coming to prominence with, I guess, Pirate Life from a few years earlier and a few others, but it wasn't at the domination that it is at the moment. Was there any particular reason you chose cans?
Yeah, a few of us here just enjoyed tinnies. Scotty had a definite, love for them. I think from my side, I prefer them as a vessel just from a technical standpoint and quality, but also from an aesthetic point as well. I think, we're a new brand. We have to make sure that our product ends up in people's hands in the best shape possible. And we strongly believe and to this day feel that cans are the best way to do that. So for me, it was both a branding and aesthetic thing, but it was more so a quality control thing. And, we just didn't really think of anything else. Like it was always going to be cans.
Yeah, no, I can remember an initial meeting with Stirls and Mick, and might have been Josh Kerr, I think. And the guy, it might have been Stirls. The guys sort of leaned across the table and were like, so Scotty, what do you think of cans? And they sort of jumped back like I was going to take a swing at him. And I was like 100% for cans. I don't actually want to do this in any other format. Like I'm not interested in doing bottles, that's for sure, because, I'd done plenty of that and I knew the challenges. And for me, there was this weird thing happening back around 2015. There was a couple of breweries that were starting to use cans, but that whole, the rest of the craft beer world was still sort of firmly entrenched in this idea that no, better quality beer is always in bottles, and that was just a long way from the truth, because I knew the technical aspects of it and performance-wise that tinnies offer much better protection. They're safer around kids. They're endlessly recyclable. They give someone with Stirl's sort of branding firepower a much bigger canvas, I guess, to work on. There was a whole bunch of reasons like that, but for me, it was primarily the technical and the quality aspects of what it does as a package for beer. And a close second behind that was what I thought Stirl's, with what he was already sort of showing us he'd be able to come up with. And there was never really any doubt. And we've always very much sort of been in that mindset. And I remember at the time, okay, not many people are doing it. And I was like, well, good, but it's going to be the best thing for us. We knew that regardless of what other people thought, this is what we wanted to do, and we were just going to go hammer and tong at it. And there was some thoughts that out in the industry that the small scale canning lines weren't performing as well as small scale bottling lines, but I didn't think that was true at all if we got it right. And we had this little cask canning line that served us so well up until about 12 months ago, and we'd won Hottest 100, we'd won the AIBA championship and Best International Pale Ale and a bunch of other medals all over the place for our beers, even in that little entry level canning line, if you like. So,
and the tinny was actually beating draft nearly in every comp, which was pretty amazing.
Wow.
Our first gold was the can outscoring the draft.
Yep. We actually had that for the first couple of competitions, and when XPA won the trophy at AIBA in 2017, both the entries, the canned product and the keg, both got gold medals. But as Stirls just said, it was the can that actually clinched the trophy because it was rated half a point better. And that was that's going back on this primitive little entry level canning line. So if nothing else, that proved the concept then and there, because we basically built this business on that little canning line, pumping out.
Yeah, you used to get a rattle up, I can tell you that much.
at the best. And this is no word of a lie. Sometimes when it's actually operated in part with rubber bands, and when a rubber band would break, the canning line stopped.
Oh my God! Wow.
Yep, true story. It's on the lid dispenser for anyone out there who understands these machines. But when we got our new canning line about a year ago, a much more sophisticated machine from Germany. It can run a lot faster, and performance-wise, it's much better. The packaged product better than it's ever been, because we built and supported a lab to support the packaged product and whatnot. But we got an awful long way on this tiny little canning line. So, I just have no idea what life would have been like for us if we'd have gone down the bottle track. I dare say we would have had to stop midstream and start thinking about canning lines.
Absolutely. I think the domination of cans, I think yourselves were a big part of it. And it's just like us here at Beer Cartel, it's just like something we've never even seen before. And it's just got absolutely crazy.
Yeah, well, it's amazing. It's a global thing too, you have a look in the US now, and there's so many like fairly large scale breweries that have built their brands on bottles that also have to have canning lines, and just because out of sheer consumer demand, I actually saw a photo today on the internet on Instagram, I think, of La Chouffe Blondale in cans.
Oh, no way.
No idea whether that they would have ever considered that 5 years ago. I don't know how long they've made beer in cans. And you see Rodenbach beers in cans. I know they've been around for a few years, but, I guess it's a technology and in the advancements we've been able to make as an industry that, it's people have just come around, There was this old sort of 1970s, 1980s urban myth about beer in cans tasted metallic and tasted tinny and all this other rubbish, and it's just not true. It's not true. It's funny that it took craft beer to actually bring back this huge mainstream lager package back into something that's super credible now. I doubt there's very many breweries that would start packaging going, no, we're going to do bottles and no cans.
I guess talking about the whole craft beer industry and the changes it's been going through. Another one that I know we've seen a lot of, and it is a worldwide trend, is limited releases. Consumers always wanting new and always wanting the newest and latest and all that. How have you found that as a brewery, and I guess in the brewing sense, but also in a marketing sense?
Yeah, I think from a marketing standpoint, our limited releases have been just this beautiful drumbeat of great beer that underpins a really strong core range. At Balter, we've never fallen into the trap of chasing a trend. We'll make a beer because we really, really believe in it, and a beer that we really love to drink. And sometimes most times it's crossed over with the audience as well. But there definitely has become this race. I think new is nearly better than good these days. People just want new, next, now, give me more. And I personally don't believe in it. I think there's a fair bit of faulty beer getting around out there that might be new, but it's not necessarily good. And we just want to make sure we can only take responsibility for our own actions. And I guess from our point is we just want to make sure we're pumping out the very best stuff when we do it. And not at a frequency that causes burnout either. I think, we like to keep it interesting, but we don't want to burn out in that process. So we're just sort of finding our feet in terms of frequency and drumbeat. But right now we feel like we've got a nice sort of steady stream. So that's sort of probably from a marketing point of view.
Yeah. What are the challenges from a brewer's perspective?
I think there's always this danger, and I know there's and again, this is global. There's a lot of breweries that just find it really hard to hold the line and avoid not releasing one or two beers every week, and it's really, I'm assuming it's chewing up a lot of time and resources and, discipline and what have you for breweries that feel that they're on that treadmill, that they have to. There's an insecurity, I think, where you're just dropping a new beer every week because you're worried that no one's going to pay any attention to you the week after. And I think there's a danger as an industry globally that in a lot of ways the breweries themselves, we as an industry, have trained our audience to have a really short attention span. Because there's always someone who's just going to falter and just put out a new beer this week, next week, and the week after, when they probably may not have been wise to release any of them. So as Sterl said, people are thinking that new might be superior to better, and there's this constant discarding of, you've tried this beer once and then that's it. You never go back to it again. And people talk a lot about sustainability and these sorts of things these days, and from a purely practical point of view, there's no efficiency in doing a one-off that may or may not be loved and that may not have really done anything for beer. We won't make a beer unless there's a reason for it, and it's got to be above the fact that, those guys over there did this last week, so we need to do it this week. We took our time putting hazy out, but I'm glad we did. Sterls was at me for a while going, check this out. And, I'd been in the US and drunk a bunch of hazies and still wasn't convinced, and came home and tried a bunch here that were as equally sort of up and down. Some were great and some were absolutely shithouse. And, it seemed to be that unless you were under the fermenter tap the day before it was meant to be canned, you'd kind of missed out on the best of that beer. And in that particular instance, I thought there's got to be a better way. So we took our time and, we made a beer here on the pilot system and called Citrapalooza, and we just got a lot of awesome feedback, and I had to keep making it on the pilot, and that's what told us that no, there's a real audience and a market for this beer, and a real great response when you do. This deserves to graduate up to the big system. So again, Sterls went and weaved his magic and came out with that, sublimely beautiful looking can. We put a great beer in it. and away it goes, But it wasn't something that we decided in one meeting or over a 2-hour lunch break or something. This was something that was 12 months plus coming down the line from initially brewing it on their pilot system and looking at the feedback and doing it again and again and again. And I wanted to make sure that wasn't just a one-off, that it wasn't just a golden eagle unicorn sort of beer, that was repeatable and that it would stand up, that people that wherever they were in Australia could actually get a go at, say, hazy, and it would be in great shape for them, and I'm very proud that beer has held up so well. So, that's.
I think you have absolutely nailed it. And you mentioned there that it took you over a year to come up with it. I remember talking to, I can't remember who I was talking to from Balter, but they were talking about for Captain Sensible. This was, I think, after you'd released the XPA and all that, but this was the beer you'd actually been almost working on longest, and you refused to release your session until you were happy with it.
Yeah, that's right. We did. We probably had 6 or 8 different versions go up on the tap room, and it was a beer where I probably started to try and outsmart myself. I was thinking about, okay, well, this needs to be a beer with, that a lot of people, I'm trying to cater for a lot of people to this beer. And after 1 or 2 iterations like that, I sort of realised, no, what I've got to try and do is make a great Balter beer that just happens to be 3.5% alcohol. As soon as I changed my mindset about how I approached the beer itself, it started to come together. But again, that took a while to get that beer to where I wanted it before we're at the point where, like, bang, all right, let's go. This one can graduate into the core range and a beer we can proudly put the Balter stamp on out in the wider world, And I'm very, very, very pleased to say that in the last 2 beer competitions that I've entered the beer in a row, it's won a trophy and then a gold medal at the AIBA. So, like, from a peer-based judging technical point of view, it's standing up really well as well, And that's certainly not why we make beer. We don't make beer for awards, but when they come by you, from a professional judging peer-based competitions like these ones, they're a great benchmark for your business and your brewing crew and your team and your whole philosophy, top to bottom, about what we're doing. And it was a lot of work, but it's now very satisfying to see that beer out and about in the wild and people enjoying it. That's what it's about at the end of the day. Smile.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the whole story that you've been telling from the marketing and the beer side, it hasn't been a slap together job to take advantage kind of the names, but everything is done with thought and is done to a top level and top quality. You talked about previously the canning line that you were using, and that you upgraded it a year ago. I know you've got a fantastic tap room in Currumbin. But has there had to be expansions? What's been happening, I guess, on the expansion front?
Well, we've just the canning line we've had for nearly a year now. We've just put in a new keg line, which has been about in the works really for about 18 months. We first started talking about it till we've actually got it and commissioned here. And that canning keg line actually takes our keg beer to a new level as well. So. It's a lot safer. It's a much more consistent. It's a lot quicker. The beer is definitely getting into the kegs in better condition. The kegs themselves are being washed and prepared to accept beer, in much better shape than they could have possibly have happened for us before. And some of these things just only can happen if you're growing. If you're doing well enough to be able to swing yourself up to the next rung, on the jungle gym and grab that next hand place and swing yourself along. And that's, you kind of got to be patient. You've got to be in good shape and you've got to stay in the game and be making great beer in the first place to actually be able to get to make better beer, if you like, or be able to deliver better beer out there. So it's just one of those things about the industry, you sort of can't start with everything at once. So, but we've always maintained that we want to grow into what we're doing. We've focused really hard on what's the best option for us, say even from an equipment point of view. Okay, this is what I want to use. This will help us make the best beer. Shit, that's a lot of money. We can't afford that. How the hell do we get there? And we've managed to find a way and take a long-term view of how we do these things. I've just installed a new vessel in the brew house to also help us with our capacity in the brew house. So now that we can knock out up to 6 brews a day in an 8-hour shift, which this time last year we were down to 3. So that also helps us as well. So it helps reduce the stress on the business when we get to the pointy end of the year with October, November, and into the Christmas mayhem, to be able to well and truly have the capacity to make as much beer at our what I consider to be very high standards day in, day out. We don't have to compromise our standards when the squeeze is on. So, and that's what's behind the expansion we do, is to make sure that we can actually get through every summer, every year. And for us, that's probably the overriding thing. We've got to make the best beer we possibly can. We've got to make as much of it as we need to when we need to make it, and to be able to do that, and again, never let our guard down.
Is your brewery, from a physical space, still got plenty of room, or can we expect an additional site? Or how's that kind of going with the increased volumes?
No, we're very lucky. We've got a good site here, so we've got we've got a landlord who's very happy with us. So we're here for the long term, and we're blessed with the room we've got on this site to be able to do everything that we could conceivably want to do here.
We're also really fortunate too. Like, we've got a guy called Azza Waters who works here, and Azza built the brewery for us. And Azza, we've planned, not that we'd probably ever get there, but if we wanted to on this site, could brew up to 30 million litres one day, if that was the case, And the work, I guess, Azza Waters puts in there, he's an amazing project manager, and we've planned this out to the nth degree, and I think it's kind of reflective of the people a little bit there too,
Absolutely.
Because one thing we found when we were setting up Balter was everyone was knocking out walls all the time and basically creating a maze, and we knew quite early on for us that we needed to just find a bunch of blank canvases, and we've been very lucky. We had 750 squares here, then another 2,300 behind us, and then another 750 just across the way. So it's all in one precinct. And so all up, you just got over 3,000 squares or 3,700 squares. And, it's definitely allowed us to sort of not have to think about moving from here, which is bloody a good thought.
Yeah, our borders tend to be not vertical walls, but horizontal roofs. So,
yeah.
and as Stirls was saying, we've got, Aaron Waters in his background in architecture and design has just been a godsend, in project managing the build of this building. Like, as a concreter, I knew that I wanted the floors to be pitched at a certain rate and have the drainage work a certain way. So we kind of were lucky having those previous life skills and external skills between all of us. We'd all done other stuff that lent to our current disciplines, I suppose, So, being able to start from the ground up like we did, and Azza putting so much effort into the aesthetic and the look, of our tap room and the greater build, he's always 2 steps ahead, thinking about where the next roof's got to be raised, or how we've got to get this concrete poured over here, and dealing with councils and governments and making sure that our sort of our licensing side of it, our authority to operate as a business is always looked after as well. So there's so many sides to being in a brewery, just apart from making beer or talking about it even. Like there's the day-to-day stuff of how do those trucks operate in and out of our site. Like, there's just the pure logistics and day-to-day nuts and bolts of having things work well and work smoothly, that are just such an important part that gets missed in all the sort of glamour side of things. Because we wouldn't have what we've got without Azza and what he does, and let alone obviously the sales guys and the other logistics guys, and all the team top to bottom. And being able to have a site when you come here, like this place is Balter, top to bottom, and it's just because we've managed to infuse Balter right through every brick in the place, let alone every tinny. So
it has been it's an absolutely stunning 4.5 years, or about 4.5 years, or 3.5 since you first released the beer. But I guess last but not least, what can we expect for the future? What's on the horizons?
Mate, we just want to keep that with enjoyment thing alive. We have a lot of fun as a brewery, the way we communicate, the way we run our events, the way we make our beer, everything we do. And for Balter, we just want to sort of keep that dream alive, I guess. We love what we do for a living. We feel really fortunate that we get to make beer for a living, and I hope people at the end of the day feel that joy and that excitement that we get from doing our work. There'll be plenty more limited releases down the track, and probably a few more collaborations on the horizon and stuff like that.
Yeah, and there's, that's a thing. We'll keep on keeping on, I guess. Like you say, sometimes it seems like we've been at this for 10 or 15 years, and it's hard when you hear, you realise when someone else says back to you, we've only had beer for 3.5 years in the market, you realise, yeah, wow, okay, that's a pretty short period of time. So, I guess we've found our feet. We're constantly growing, and there's always stress and pressures and the to and fro of all that sort of thing. But we've managed to do it. I like to think we've managed to do it really well, and we're at that point now where we can, move forward confidently. A big thing for me is not just the capacity side of it and the new toys. It's just being able to, to make sure that our beer is great day in, day out, and that real quality piece and consistency piece is what's brought Balter a long, long way already. And just as our people get more miles under their wheels, and the team gets better and better and more consolidated, and there's a whole bunch of things where we're improving, in every which direction. I like to think we're getting better at what we do, right across the board. So
I think from a consumer point, especially I guess myself working in the consumer point in retail, the beers have been so well received from the core range through to the limited releases, and there's, I guess, massive congratulations on what you've done in the last 3.5, 4 years. I'm super excited to see where you guys are, what happens to Balter in the next year, 2 years, and further down the field. But I guess thank you so much for joining me today. It has been an absolute pleasure hearing the Balter story from how it was, I guess, first conceived through to where it is now. And thank you so much.
Mate, thanks a lot, Lachlan. We've enjoyed our time with you, mate. And thanks for listening to us.
Thanks for having us, Lockie. Awesome to talk to you, mate.
Cheers. Balter has truly changed the landscape of craft beer in Australia. Their unique design, branding, and their absolutely killer beer have really set the benchmark for craft beer. Once again, thank you so much to Stirling and Scotty for joining me today. And if you have any questions, please let us know on our Facebook group, Beer Cartel's Craft Beer Collective. If you'd like to continue to stay up to date with the latest from the craft beer industry, please hit subscribe at either iTunes Podcast, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcast. That's it for today. I'll see you next time.